Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut channel. So today we are looking at a 2022 Toyota RAV4. Now we have talked about the RAV4 and this generation has been out since 2019, but in 2022 they did some updates and so are we. For the video we're going to do a deeper technical review of the RAV4, something we haven't done before for this model. We're going to look at the inside, the outside, but more importantly we're going to do an update for the common problems and things that have popped up as this generation of RAV4 went on. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos. If you are a returning subscriber, well, thank you so much for watching another one of my videos. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Let's start with the engine talk, and I'm calling it engine talk because there's actually one engine between the hybrid and the non-hybrid variants of the RAV4. Now, this is the A25A. We have talked about this engine in this channel, if you've been watching for a while, a lot, because I really like this engine. I think it's one of the better, newer engines that they made. But let's briefly talk to those who have not watched those many videos that I made about this engine. This is a 2.5 liter dynamic force engine. What that means is the angles of the valves are not the traditional open. They're almost straight to a point where the air charge just comes in and goes and makes a twirl as it goes in. That's the dynamic force part. Some highlights, technical highlights of this engine is the variable valve timing system, specifically on the intake side. It is something revolutionary. We've seen this same design in Mazda and a few other manufacturers, but Toyota seems to have made it really reliable so far. It has been out since 2018 in multiple models. So the intake gear has a motor attached to it. That electric motor spins the speed of the camshaft. When you want to advance the timing, that motor is going to speed up to advance the gear and advance the timing. When it wants to retard the timing, it's going to actually slow down in relative to the camshaft speed, and that's how it retards the timing. And when they spin at the same speed, that's base timing. Pretty cool design. Sounds like a disaster on paper, but it's actually super reliable so far. There hasn't really been any issues. Examples of this engine with 250,000 miles have surfaced already with no problems whatsoever. Another thing about this engine is it has dual injection, or Toyota D4S. So you have direct injection, but at the same time you have port injection. So now you don't have the typical problems with direct injection. So you don't have carbon buildup like you hear some manufacturers have. This engine will not develop this issue. Another thing that is a return from previous models that didn't have this, EGR. We have an EGR system in this engine. So far, there hasn't been issues because, again, hybrids and EGRs haven't gotten along historically. Carbon buildup, clogged up valves, and all that stuff. But so far, so good. Another highlight of this engine is the coolant system. This does not have a mechanical water pump, and we're talking even the non-hybrid variant. It has an electric water pump, and coupled with that is a coolant distribution valve or coolant flow valve. Now what that does is it prioritizes where the coolant needs to go. Do you need heat? Do you not need it? It prioritizes coolant flow in a way to warm up the engine fastest and make you not lose heat from the engine. Keep it at optimum efficiency at all times. Works really good. There has been a few things with the coolant valves and some of the hardware of that cooling system that have gone wrong, like thermostats, like some of the coolant flow valves, but they are not at a high rate. We're going to talk about these in the common problem section of this video. And the difference between the hybrid model and the non-hybrid model is the hybrid model does not have a vacuum pump. The non-hybrid model does have a vacuum pump because you have a brake booster that is vacuum operated. Other difference between them is the hybrid model has different pistons, different compression, different cycle, different camshafts. That's the difference, because you have an Atkinson cycle engine and a non-Atkinson cycle engine. That is the difference between the two. That's why the hybrid variant like this one is named A25A FXS, and the non-hybrid variant is FKS two different designations for a same engine that is modified for each application. And then the RAV4 transmissions. There are two possible transmissions with this RAV4. For the non-hybrid model, you have an 8-speed transmission. You will read a lot of issues about this 8-speed transmission, but from experience, the RAV4 has the least number of issues with the 8-speed. Yes, they have that shifting that is strange at times until it adapts, but it seems to have the least amount of problems in the RAV4. 2018 Camry, different story. 2017 Highlander and Sienna, very, very different story. That's where a majority of the issues are. But in the RAV4, there hasn't really been many issues. On the hybrid side of things is the eCVT, or in my world, it's called a tank. So the eCVT in Toyota and Lexus hybrids, it is the best transmission potentially currently in the market. They just don't have issues. I mean, the old Priuses used to have some issues. These, nothing. Just change the fluid, don't modify them, and you will not have issues with them. They're really good transmission, folks. And if you think this is similar to a CVT transmission, a regular CVT, it is not. Please don't shy away from a hybrid because of the word CVT. It has nothing to do with a regular CVT. It is completely different. Only the operating principles are of a CVT. Everything else is not really of a CVT. Actually, it is not a complicated transmission, believe it or not. As big of a statement that is, it is not a complicated transmission inside. It's a few motors, few gears, that's really it. An automatic transmission, even from the olden days, is a lot more complicated than this transmission is. This is very simple, and that's why it's very reliable. Let's take a tour underneath the RAV4. Let's see some of the things that make this car a great car, starting with the covers. Now, some people dislike the covers. Actually, I happen to think, as a mechanic, these are the best invention in cars. This keeps things protected, clean, and the RAV4 really takes it all the way down. The hybrid, the non-hybrid, and the Prime, of course, all have the same coverings. Very simple maintenance-wise. This little access door gets you to the oil filter. There's nothing really to it. Moving on to the suspension stuff and the brakes. Very simple design. I mean, even when they updated to the TNGA and all that, they remained with their simple designs. Only differences from the previous generations, you have aluminum knuckles. Lightweight, they work, they're okay. One downside to that is the bearing down the road will get seized to this. Small sacrifice for the sake of lightness and better gas mileage. Single piston caliper here, not a dual piston caliper. Ball joint that separates, same lower control arm design. Very simple strut design. There's really not much to it. Axle goes through it. Everything is extremely, extremely simple. Then we move down and you notice the exhaust makes a curve. Not as dramatic of a curve as the Prime, but it curves. And the reason it curves is because over here you have the charcoal canister right behind this, and then the fuel tank. Fuel tank in the 19s had issues with it not having like a dead zone in the fuel tank where you can't fill it up. You can only fill it 7/8 of the way. That's been long gone, it's resolved. That's history problems now, but removing this fuel tank was actually super simple, very simple to work on this car, much simpler than the non-hybrid. But the exhaust continues to curve because you have a fuel tank here. And the reason the fuel tank is here is because the hybrid battery is actually on the other side. And you can, if you come here to this area right here, you see where the high voltage cable goes into the car, into the battery. This is where it connects to the battery, and this is where it goes to the motor generator rear, MGR. And speaking of MGR, we have a small issue with MGR that everybody have asked about, concerned about, and there's a lot of issues about it. Here's what the problem is. MGR is right here. That's the unit. Really hard to show you, but right there. Do you see this cable that goes in? It goes in at the bottom into MGR up top. Problem is, this gets corrosion in it, and now you have to replace the whole cable. What Toyota did is actually they flipped the design. This started connecting at the bottom, it used to connect at the top, and now you have basically a collection area. Just like a little cup where water sits and collects and collects and then collects, and the wires are sitting in it. The wires are weatherproof, but they're not waterproof. You dunk them in water, they're gonna corrode eventually. The fix for this was so, for lack of a better word, ridiculous, because all they did here was open up the case. Half the case of this wire is missing. That's it. That's the whole repair. So I'm not going to suggest that you're going to go and do this to your car, even though you could. But you got to be very careful here. You basically have to make a drain hole or a drain area so water would drain out of that and you won't have the corrosion. But unfortunately, if you do have the corrosion, you're going to have to replace the entire cable, which runs basically all the way from here, all the way to the front into the inverter. Not the greatest situation. People have voiced a lot of concern about this, but there has been another thing that they added that kind of makes this better, which is this cover. The earlier models, some of them didn't have this cover. This cover actually deflects majority of this water away from the area of MGR. There's never been a cover on hybrids in the back. Very rarely will you see a cover on MGR. There's nothing here. There has never been many problems with MGR until now, because somebody decided to flip the connector and now it acts like a bucket of water. That's all this issue is, folks, just so in case you were wondering about it. Let's talk about the rear suspension. Things are very standard here. They've become very standard. Double wishbone suspension, spring is right here, shock is here, trailing arm in the front. Very simple stuff here. And this has made the RAV4 basically a raised Camry. In the past, they used to be very different, suspension-wise, subframe-wise, everything. Now, it's exactly the same as a Camry. This could be a Camry. The only way I tell it's not a Camry is the muffler is different. But otherwise, it's exactly the same. Same setup of suspension, same simple setup. Parking brake is electronic, very simple, just motor on the caliper. People dislike this. This is actually very reliable and simple to service. You don't have the parking brake mechanism and the shoes that rust and fall apart. This is just a motor. It'll, we are in an age where motors will run forever, basically. We've seen them already. And then there are the little touches. This little aerodynamic flap that just takes the air and channels it out so it would not go in this huge void right here. I mean, when you look at this area right here, there's just a huge void. It's not covered, it's just wide open. And imagine if the air just comes in and hits this. It's just gonna act like an air brake. So they put this little flap so air would just deflect away, not into this void. Pretty cool, very simple. Folks, you look at this and it looks complicated. There's all these components. This is not complicated. If you want to see complicated, take a peek underneath a BMW or an Audi especially. This is not complicated. All these covers, all these fancy covers that you see, they come out in a matter of 15 minutes and this car is wide open. You can see everything. You can see where the cable runs. And this is the beauty of these cars. They remain simple. I love working on the newer cars because you take these covers, everything is nice and clean and still simple. Very easy to work on, very easy to maintain, very well made, everything here. I mean, you will not find cars that the stuff you touch, the panels are flimsy and underneath, this is solid plastic. It's pretty, usually it's upside down. Usually the stuff you see and the customer sees are the stuff that they really spend all the time to make it look great, and stuff underneath that, put the cheapest stuff. Not here. Everything here is just solid protection for the stuff that matters, because the body panels, if they're thin, they'll last forever still. They're annoying, but they'll last forever. But this stuff, this is gonna get the beating of the road and the debris, and it'll still be there after many, many years. Let's talk about some common problems. And kind of an update to the previous video that we did about common problems with these, when the 2019, 2020 were more of the common ones. Let's talk about the 2022 models and 2021, because some of these problems, actually majority of them, have been resolved or changed or new things have been added, and let's just give you guys an update. Kind of a theme that's been going on with Toyota lately, their door seems to love to hold water. And the RAV4 is actually no exception to that. Corolla has this problem, RAV4 has this problem. Underneath the door, there is a seal that just seals from noise and whatnot. Sounds like a good idea. And by the way, something most people don't actually realize is water, when it hits the outside of the car, it goes through this seal, the belt molding. This is not a seal to hold water out. This is just to slow its way down and deflect most of it outside, but some of it will go inside the door. All car doors will have drains at the bottom where water will come in, drain at the bottom, and life is wonderful. Except the RAV4 has a small thing. Remember that seal at the bottom of the door that we talked about? Well, that seal has a problem where it collects dirt at a certain spot in the seal and it blocks that hole that's supposed to drain the water out, and the water starts collecting inside the door. Every time you take off, stop, open the door, it sloshes around and it makes a very annoying sound. The fix is so simple. I don't know why they're not doing it from the factory. They are at some point, but some of them don't have it, and it just, that's the way things are done, I suppose. So this fix is just to make a small cut in the seal to allow for that debris, if there's ever tree sap, leaves, whatever that make its way inside, wouldn't clog these drains. So that's something, in case you have a RAV4 and run into that, it's as simple as that, very simple fix. Then there are a few things with the engine bay that seem to be common. This is more before 2022 and even before 2021, but these are new things. So there's a valve under the hood that controls the coolant. We talked about it, pretty cool. But I told you there was some valve issues. And the thing about the issue of the valve, it's not really a big deal. The valve sticks, you replace it, life is good. But what's happening is, it doesn't turn on a check engine light. All of a sudden you get this message on the center display that says, engine maintenance required. Not your oil maintenance required, it just says engine maintenance required. And it doesn't erase, doesn't go away, it's always there, no check engine light, and people kind of wonder. Now what that means is, this car has had an engine malfunction or some problem that is not an emissions failure, because it is not an emissions failure to have a coolant valve stick. So the check engine light is defined as an emissions failure only. That's when the check engine light comes on, but that's not an emissions failure. So that's why you have that strange message. You have to check for codes in order to know why that message is on. There are a bunch of reasons it could come on, that message, but one of the very common reasons that light comes on is the coolant switching valve or the flow valve that gets stuck and it sets that code. And while we're under the hood, let's talk about a problem actually caused by you and me. I actually own a car that has this engine. Something with this engine, because of its very sensitive oiling system, this has a variable oil pump that can change the speed, it's very sensitive to the kind of oil you put. Always stick with the oil as recommended for these engines, by the way. But there's something about these engines that I've seen happen over the years. They have a lot of moisture, and every engine will have moisture when you let it sit outside. It's very cold, you don't drive it much, and you drive it very short distances. They'll develop moisture. You'll pull the oil cap, you'll see white stuff inside. Some people will freak out and think that's a head gasket failure. It's not. That's normal with engines. But with this particular engine, because of how sealed it is and because how the oiling system works in it, you can build excessive moisture. And what ends up happening, that moisture doesn't just collect in the oil cap. You actually get that moisture in the oil, and there's enough of it where you pull the dipstick, oil is milky white. And that, if left in the engine, will start corroding stuff inside and leads up to disasters. Folks, if you don't drive these cars much, especially in cold weather, you gotta check that oil. If you see it white, change that oil right away. If you don't drive this car a lot, 6 months, do not leave this oil more than 6 months in this engine. Some people will start the whole oil change interval debacle. We're not going to get into that. Just if you want to keep this car long from a professional, change the oil every 6 months, every 5,000 miles, whichever comes first, you're not going to have problems with this engine. Let's talk about the exterior of the RAV4. And folks, honestly, I will tell you my honest opinion here. When you first set eyes on the RAV4, the design is very uninspiring, unemotion moving. It just looks like a box. But as you spend more time with the RAV4 and you look at it every day, it actually starts to grow on you, because this is a functional design. It is not a design that is meant to wow you and then you find out later that it actually doesn't work. It's a design meant to work for you as the years of ownership pass by. And this is what I love about this car. This is a theme you're going to see in this car, that there was a lot of compromises in the wow factor for sake of functionality, for sake of simplicity. And this is the thing about this car. This car does not promise to be this hyper luxury car or this very exciting car to move your soul and drain your wallet as the warranty runs out. No. This is a car that's meant to last forever, take you from A to B, very comfortably, very safely, and really, really functional fashion. And it does that perfectly fine. Now, one design that I wish they integrated in all of them is the Adventure and the Off-Road edition. Those have like kind of the bubbled front end. I like it, actually it looks pretty cool. They don't have that in all models. I wish they do, but just check those out because they have a slightly different front end. Kind of a cool looking thing. The off-road model is my absolute least favorite model. I'm sorry if you have one and like it, but that's just my opinion. I think this is not an off-roading SUV. If you want an off-roader, go buy a 4Runner, because that's a true off-roader. This will do light off-road driving, not really off-roading per se, and that's about it. And the regular models do it the same as the off-road model. I just don't see where the off-road model really works other than the big old tires and the different front end. There is, however, one thing that I think they got a little bit carried away with, and that is cheapness. See, when they make functional cars, they try to focus on features and functionality and all this, but they sometimes forget about the most basic things in a car. I mean, the way the door slams feels very cheap. The hood, when you drive on the highway, starts shaking. The mirrors, they still have a problem with the mirrors. There is still a kit to reinforce the door so the mirror wouldn't shake at higher speeds. These are not really big things, because what matters in this car is built well. The engine, the transmission, the things that will drain your bank. Hood shakes a little bit, it's not really the end of the world, it's not coming off. Same thing with the mirror, same thing with the door closing. Most people won't even notice these things. But to a car person who's going to look at this, they are going to measure quality like that. And this is where this starts to struggle a little bit. It just doesn't feel quality built, even though it is. And I wish they would have spent a little bit more time, a little bit thicker metal, just so it wouldn't vibrate so much. But that's one of the things with the exterior. Let's talk about the interior of the RAV4. And this is where this could be go both ways. Because when you first peek eyes on this at a dealership, after you've seen many of those very exciting cars that with a expiration date, you look at this and it's like, this is so bland and boring. There's nothing going on here. The design is very too simple. And people usually, that shies them away sometimes. Whoa, what a big mistake that is. Because it takes you, again, just like the exterior that grows on you, this interior also grows on you after a little bit of time. See, the thing about this interior is, it was not designed to wow you. It was designed to make your life better. That's, for lack of a better word, it really does, because there is nothing difficult here to operate. I mean, this is a hybrid limited 22. Every single bell and whistle here. There is no model more equipped than this one. And yet, it's not overwhelming. You look here, there's not a million buttons. No, there's just a very simple to use climate control with very large knobs. Very simple. You turn this, you change the temperature, you press auto, your fan is in the middle. That's it. There is not much else to do here. Same thing in the center stack. You have the shifter, which is a good old school shifter, even in the hybrid model. You have parking brake, hold, trail mode, drive mode, EV mode. If you've been driving hybrids for a while, this is nothing different. This is very simple. Cup holders right here, they're enormous. Wireless charger, screen, not huge, not tiny, just the right size. Steering wheel is basically the same as every other Toyota. Everything is very, very simple to operate, not overwhelming. Most people will look at that and be like, wait a second, but I'm paying all this money. I want a car that's exciting, that has a swooping design, all these cool screens. Well, guess what? Why are you buying this car? Do you want it to be cool and be outdated in 2 years and they're all the same? Or do you want it to last 10, 15 years? Because if you don't want it to, you don't care about it lasting 10, 15 years, you're not looking at the right car. RAV4 is expensive compared to its competition. Not because it's high-tech and cool. No, because it's well made. It's going to last. And that's the whole key of this car. And after spending a week here, me personally, you love this. Because this is the kind of car you get inside, you operate everything. It's so simplistic. But there are a couple things that I think are interesting and kind of completely out of character, at least one of them. So the rear view mirror, it has been around for a very long time in cars, works great, it's a mirror, you see behind, you have blind spots, all this good stuff. And the RAV4, they decided, and this is a theme that Toyota has, we'll talk about that in a second. You flip it and it turns into a rear view camera instead of a rear view mirror. Very nice when you see it. Whoa, it's exciting. Until you drive it, if you're a little older like me, you're going to start getting dizzy from looking at a camera in motion. Maybe that's just me. But then again, you start realizing it's not exactly very good. And the quality of the camera is not very good. Not an option that I would pay extra just to get this trim, just to get this useless option, for lack of a better word. And this is a theme with Toyota. They do this a lot. They put these random options in random cars that after a few years and nobody cares about them, they just suddenly disappear and nobody cares. This is one of them. The other one is the Stargaze sunroof on the Venza hybrid. Don't know why, that's the only model that has it, not Lexus, not your high-end Avalon, whatever. No, the Venza hybrid only. Not this. That's how Toyota does things. They just put these random options everywhere. This is one of them. Not very good, not something I'd recommend. Completely out of character and absolutely useless. And in case you're wondering, that rear view camera, this is the actual camera that shows you the rear view. So if you have obstruction or something, this is where the camera is, sits on the inside. It sees actually through the glass, which is, I guess it's a cool location for a camera. I wish the rear view camera of the reverse camera, if you would, was there. That would be inside, it wouldn't get dirty, but that's where the rear view camera is, not the reversing camera is on the RAV4. So what is the final verdict on the 2022 RAV4? I love this car because this is one of the few cars remaining that is honest to its mission. Doesn't look extremely exciting. Doesn't have all the gadgetry that it's supposed to distract you from what really matters. No. It has no turbo, no crazy CVT transmission. It just has normal features. Yes, it has that rear view camera that is interesting, but that's only in the limited models. You buy a regular one, you can still get these with hubcaps. That is, people look at that and it's like, oh, that's ridiculous. It is not. Some people don't care. Some people don't want to pay extra for alloy wheels. They have the option to buy it with hubcaps. Great. This is why this has become one of the best-selling SUVs out there, because it is honest about its mission. I love this thing, and right now it is at its prime time for buying. When a manufacturer issues a mid-year refresh, usually they take care of all the little stuff, and that's where the best version of the car comes out. Not the year after, not the 6 months after, the mid-year refresh, when the best version of that car comes in, unless they get carried away and they change everything. They didn't. They hardly changed anything in this. Some people will keep talking about the changes forever in multi-videos and all that, but the truth of the matter is, nothing changed, folks. Because to me, when they changed the lights and a few little things here and there, they changed nothing. They did not even touch the engine. They did not touch the transmission. They did changes here and there behind the scenes, but not radical changes. This is the best time to buy a RAV4, and this is the best version to buy, 2022 and up. The 19 remains, in my opinion, the worst one to buy because they have all the common problems. 2020 got better, 2021 better, almost equal to the 22, but the 22 is where it's at, where most of these problems, especially the big ones with the hybrids like we talked about in this video, most of them have been solved. That's the reality of the RAV4. This is how Toyota keeps their car on the road forever, because they keep trying to fix their little issue, even the littlest issues. They keep fixing them. They don't change things radically, and everything goes down the drain. Folks, this is not an exciting car. It will never move your emotions, but it'll keep you on the road for 10, 15, 20 years effortlessly. But one thing about this car that matters, this is not a car you can buy and neglect. Some people will get an idea about that. Oh, I'll buy a Toyota, neglect it, and I'll just keep going. You cannot do that with this engine. This engine is a little bit on the sensitive side of things. It will last forever if you take care of it properly. So use the correct oil, use the correct fluids, use the correct parts. If you're going aftermarket, use high quality parts and make sure they're correct for this car. This engine might be a little too sensitive to bad maintenance habits. Be careful with that, because otherwise you will have this car for a very long time and you're going to be very, very satisfied with this purchase. Folks, this is a car for somebody that just wants an A to B, wants to keep the car long, doesn't really care about how it looks and all the gizmos that it have. They just want an honest car that will last for a long time. If you are into modernness and cool techie features and designs, you will really dislike this, and this is absolutely not the car for you. I hope this video is helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing to the channel. Check out some of my other videos, and until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.